The diamond ring bounced twice on the restaurant floor before rolling under a table right next to her cheating fiancé's shoe. 30 seconds earlier, Charlotte Hayes had believed in forever. Now, staring at the man she'd spent 3 years loving, watching him scramble for words while his hand was still halfway up his assistant's thigh, she realized forever was just another lie, wrapped in expensive cologne and empty promises. The entire upscale Atlanta steakhouse had gone silent. Phones were out. Someone whispered "World Star." But Charlotte wasn't crying. She was calculating. And when she turned to walk out, her Louis Vuitton heels clicking against hardwood with the precision of a woman who just made a decision, she didn't know that the most powerful man in the room had been watching the whole thing unfold. Big Boss Darius, seated in the private corner booth with a glass of 18-year-old bourbon and a direct view of Charlotte's public humiliation, leaned back in his chair, adjusted the gold cufflinks on his custom Italian suit, and told his associate one thing: find out who she is. Hey, if you're loving this already, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. You're about to witness something special, and trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Now, back to the story. Charlotte Hayes wasn't supposed to be in Atlanta that night. She'd spent the last 6 months planning a wedding to Trevor Callahan, a corporate finance VP with the right pedigree, the right connections, and according to her mother, the right future. They'd met at a charity gala in Charleston, South Carolina, where Charlotte worked as a senior event coordinator for one of the South's most prestigious hospitality firms. Trevor had charm, Trevor had ambition, Trevor also had a wandering eye and a taste for younger women, but Charlotte had convinced herself those were just growing pains in their relationship. Big mistake. The truth came wrapped in a text message she wasn't supposed to see. Trevor's phone, left on the bathroom counter during a shower, lit up with a message from someone named Britt that read, "Can't wait for Atlanta tonight, babe. Wear that cologne I like." Charlotte had stared at that message for what felt like an eternity. Then she'd done what any woman with self-respect and a taste for confrontation would do. She'd booked herself a last-minute flight to Atlanta, called in a favor to find out where Trevor was taking his client dinner, and showed up unannounced in a black dress that cost more than his monthly car note. What she found was Trevor in a candlelit booth at Prime 112, hand on the thigh of Brittany, a blonde 24-year-old from his office who giggled like she'd never paid a bill in her life. And just like that, Charlotte's carefully constructed life shattered. Darius Kincaid Monroe, known in certain circles as Big Boss Darius, had built an empire on reading people. At 62, he'd seen every kind of betrayal, every brand of loyalty, and every shade of desperation that money and power could produce. Born and raised in South Memphis, he'd climbed from the streets to the boardrooms, turning real estate investments, tech acquisitions, and strategic partnerships into a billion-dollar portfolio that spanned from Miami to Seattle. He owned hotels, nightclubs, private airstrips, and enough political influence to make problems disappear with a phone call. But Darius had rules. He didn't deal in violence. He didn't tolerate disrespect toward women. And he damn sure didn't stand by while a woman with that much fire in her eyes walked out of a restaurant looking like the world had crushed her spirit. So when Charlotte stormed past his table, chin high but eyes glistening with suppressed tears, Darius made a decision that would change both their lives. "Bernard," he said quietly to the man seated across from him, his longtime friend and business advisor, "that woman just walked out of here with more dignity than half the men I know. I want to know everything about her by morning." Bernard raised an eyebrow. "You sure about this, D? She looks like she's got a whole situation going on." Darius smiled, the kind of smile that had closed million-dollar deals and opened doors that most men didn't even know existed. "That's exactly why I'm interested." Charlotte made it exactly 3 blocks before the tears came. Not the ugly, mascara-running kind, she had too much pride for that, but the quiet, soul-deep kind that only comes when you realize you've wasted 3 years on a man who never deserved even 3 minutes of your time. She stood on the corner of Peachtree Street, the Atlanta skyline, glittering above her like a postcard of someone else's perfect life, and pulled out her phone. 11 missed calls from Trevor. She blocked his number and ordered an Uber back to her hotel. What Charlotte didn't know was that the sleek black Mercedes S-Class that pulled up wasn't her ride, and the man who stepped out, dressed in an immaculate cream suit with a white Panama hat and a gold-tipped cane that was more statement piece than necessity, was about to offer her something far more valuable than a lift. "Miss Hayes," Darius said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey, "I apologize for the intrusion, but I couldn't let you leave without making sure you were all right." Charlotte looked up, startled. Recognition flickered across her face. She'd seen him in the restaurant, seated in that corner booth like he owned the place. Hell, for all she knew, he probably did. "I'm fine," she said, a little too quickly. "And how do you know my name?" Darius smiled. "I make it my business to know who's who, especially when I witness something as memorable as what happened back there." He gestured toward the restaurant. "That took courage. Most people would have caused a scene. You just took your dignity and walked out. That's rare." Charlotte studied him. There was something about the way he carried himself, confident but not arrogant, powerful but not predatory. And those eyes, they held the kind of wisdom that only came from living a full life. "Look, Mr. Darius. Just Darius is fine." "Darius," she repeated. "I appreciate the concern, but I really just want to get back to my hotel and pretend this entire night didn't happen." "I understand," Darius said, tipping his hat slightly. "But before you go, let me offer you something better than an Uber and a night alone with room service." He pulled a business card from his jacket pocket, heavy cardstock with embossed gold lettering. "Tomorrow evening, I'm hosting a private dinner on my yacht. Nothing formal, just good food, better company, and a reminder that not all men are like the fool you just left behind. No pressure, no expectations. Just an evening where you're treated the way you deserve to be treated." Charlotte took the card, her fingers brushing against the expensive paper. "And why would you do that for a complete stranger?" Darius's smile widened. "Because I believe in reminding people of their worth, especially when the world tries to convince them otherwise. And something tells me you're worth a hell of a lot more than what you just walked away from." Before Charlotte could respond, her actual Uber pulled up. Darius opened the door for her with old-school grace, and as she slid into the back seat, he leaned down slightly. "The yacht is docked at the Atlantic Marina, 7 p.m. The choice is yours, Miss Hayes. But I promise you, if you come, you won't regret it." And with that, he stepped back, tapped his cane once on the sidewalk, and returned to his Mercedes, leaving Charlotte holding a business card that simply read, "Darius Kincaid Monroe, Opportunities and Second Chances." Charlotte didn't sleep that night. She lay in her hotel bed at the Four Seasons, staring at the ceiling, replaying the evening in her head. The humiliation, the betrayal, the look on Trevor's face when he realized he'd been caught. But mostly, she kept thinking about Darius, the way he'd appeared out of nowhere like some kind of fairy godfather in designer threads, offering her not pity, but respect. By 6 a.m., she'd made her decision. She called her best friend, Vanessa, who picked up on the second ring despite the early hour. "Girl, you better be calling to tell me you keyed that man's car," Vanessa said, her voice thick with sleep. "Better," Charlotte said. "I walked out. In front of everyone. Left the ring on the floor." Vanessa whistled. "Now that's what I'm talking about." "So what now? You coming home?" Charlotte hesitated. "Actually, something weird happened after. This man, older, distinguished, like serious money, he invited me to dinner on his yacht tonight." There was a long pause. "Char, please tell me you're not about to get yourself kidnapped." "No, no. It's not like that," Charlotte said quickly. "He was respectful, classy. Gave me his card and said I deserved better. I Googled him. Vanessa, this man is a billionaire. Real estate, tech investments, philanthropy. He's legitimate." "Okay, but legitimate rich men can still be crazy," Vanessa pointed out. "What's your gut telling you?" Charlotte looked at the business card sitting on her nightstand. My gut is telling me that I've spent 3 years playing it safe with Trevor. And look where that got me. Maybe it's time to take a chance on something different." "Then take the chance," Vanessa said, "but text me every hour. Keep your location on, and if anything feels off, you get the hell out of there. Deal?" "Deal." At 6:45 p.m., Charlotte stood in front of her hotel mirror, second-guessing everything. She'd chosen a fitted emerald green dress, elegant but not trying too hard, with gold jewelry and nude heels. Her auburn hair fell in loose waves past her shoulders, and she'd gone light on the makeup, just enough to look polished. The Uber ride to Atlantic Marina felt like the longest 20 minutes of her life. When she arrived, the marina was a forest of masts and luxury vessels, but one yacht stood out from all the others. Darius's yacht, the Monroe Legacy, was a 150-foot masterpiece of sleek white lines and polished wood, with soft golden lights glowing from every deck. A crew member in crisp white uniform greeted her at the dock. "Miss Hayes, welcome. Mr. Monroe is expecting you on the main deck." As Charlotte stepped aboard, she felt like she'd entered another world. Everything was pristine, luxurious, carefully curated. Jazz music floated through hidden speakers. Miles Davis, if she wasn't mistaken. The smell of grilled seafood and fresh herbs made her stomach growl. And then she saw him. Darius stood at the bow, hands clasped behind his back, looking out over the water. He'd traded the cream suit for a navy blue linen shirt and white slacks, the Panama hat replaced with simple sophistication. When he turned and saw her, his face broke into a genuine smile. "Miss Hayes," he said, walking toward her with the grace of a man half his age. "You came. I'm honored." "I almost didn't," Charlotte admitted. "This is a lot." "I understand," Darius said, "but I'm glad you trusted your instincts. Come, dinner is ready, and I promise tonight is about you feeling valued again. Nothing more, nothing less." He offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, Charlotte took it. As they walked toward the dining area, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just taken a turn she never could have predicted. Dinner was extraordinary. Not just the food, though the grilled lobster, truffle risotto, and champagne were exceptional, but the conversation. Darius asked questions and actually listened to the answers. He wanted to know about her work, her passions, her dreams. He told stories about growing up in Memphis, about building his first business from nothing, about the lessons life had taught him. "You know what I learned early on?" Darius said, refilling her champagne glass. "People will show you who they are if you pay attention. Your ex showed you exactly who he was tonight. The question is, what are you going to do with that information?" Charlotte swirled the champagne in her glass. "I don't know yet. Part of me is furious. Part of me is heartbroken, and part of me feels relieved. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Darius said, "because now you're free. Free to build the life you actually want instead of the life someone else expected you to have." "Is that what you did?" Charlotte asked. "Built the life you wanted?" Darius leaned back, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. "Every single day, I made mistakes, trusted the wrong people, lost things I thought I couldn't live without, but I kept building. And eventually, I built something that nobody could take away from me: self-respect, genuine relationships, and the power to help people who needed it." "Like showing up to rescue crying women outside restaurants?" Charlotte said with a small smile. "Especially that," Darius said, his eyes twinkling. "Though I wouldn't call it a rescue. You rescued yourself. I just offered you a better view while you figured out what comes next." As the evening stretched on, Charlotte felt something shift inside her. For the first time in years, she felt seen, not as someone's fiancé, not as a trophy to be paraded around at corporate events, but as herself, complicated, intelligent, worthy of attention and respect. When the yacht crew brought out dessert chocolate soufflé with gold leaf, because, of course, Darius raised his glass, "To new beginnings," he said. Charlotte clinked her glass against his. To new beginnings. What she didn't know was that back in Charleston, Trevor was about to discover that humiliating the wrong woman in front of the wrong man had consequences far beyond a broken engagement. 3 days later, Charlotte's phone wouldn't stop ringing. She'd extended her Atlanta stay, checking into a boutique hotel in Buckhead while she figured out her next move. Darius had invited her to lunch the day after the yacht dinner casual, outdoors at a cafe with the best French toast in the city, then dinner at his private club, then a drive through the Georgia countryside in his vintage Rolls-Royce, talking about everything and nothing. It wasn't dating. Exactly. It was something else. Something she couldn't quite name, but didn't want to end. But now, sitting in her hotel room, she was staring at her phone in disbelief. "Vanessa, girl, have you seen Trevor's Instagram?" Charlotte opened the app with trembling fingers. Trevor's latest post was a long, rambling apology. "I made a terrible mistake. Charlotte, if you're reading this, please give me a chance to explain. I love you. I've always loved you. What you saw wasn't what it looked like." The comments were brutal. Someone had leaked the story, complete with photos from the restaurant, and now Trevor was getting roasted by everyone from high school friends to professional contacts. But that wasn't the strangest part. The strangest part was the news article Vanessa sent next. "Callahan and Associates under federal investigation for financial irregularities." Charlotte's blood ran cold as she read the details. Trevor's firm was being audited. Allegations of embezzlement, falsified reports, insider trading. The article mentioned that an anonymous tip had triggered the investigation, and several high-profile clients had already pulled their accounts. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Sometimes, karma needs a little help. Consider this a gift. D." Charlotte's hands shook as she stared at the message. Darius had done this. Somehow, in less than 3 days, he'd used his connections to expose Trevor's shady business practices and bring his entire world crashing down. She should have been horrified. She should have been concerned about the ethics of it all. Instead, she felt something else entirely. Protected, valued, like someone had finally stood up for her in a way no one ever had. When Darius called an hour later, his voice was casual, unbothered. "Good afternoon, Charlotte. I was thinking about taking the helicopter up to my estate in North Georgia tomorrow. Thought you might enjoy seeing the mountains from above. Interested?" Charlotte took a breath. "Darius. Did I what?" he asked innocently. "Trevor's company is under investigation. His whole life is falling apart." There was a pause. When Darius spoke again, his voice had lost its playful edge. "Charlotte, men like Trevor don't fall apart because of one incident. They fall apart because they've been building houses on weak foundations for years. All I did was make a phone call to someone who was already looking into certain irregularities. The rest? That's on him." "You made it happen, though," Charlotte said. "I accelerated what was already in motion," Darius corrected. "There's a difference. And I did it because no woman should be humiliated like that and watch the person responsible walk away unscathed. Call it old-fashioned justice if you want. I call it making sure the world balances out." Charlotte should have ended it right there, should have thanked him for the lovely dinners, and gone back to Charleston to rebuild her life. Instead, she said, "What time tomorrow?" She heard the smile in his voice. 10 a.m. Wear something comfortable. "And Charlotte, you're not in trouble for asking. In fact, I respect you more for it. Always question the people with power. It's how you know if they're worth trusting." The helicopter ride was spectacular. Charlotte had never been in a helicopter before. And as they lifted off from Darius's private hangar, Atlanta shrinking beneath them, she felt like she was leaving her old life behind in the most literal way possible. Darius sat beside her, headset on, pointing out landmarks as they flew north. The pilot, a woman named Captain Rivera, who flew with military precision, navigated them through clouds and over forests that stretched for miles. "My estate is about 40 minutes from here," Darius said through the headset. "It's where I go when I need to think. No business calls, no interruptions, just peace. When they landed on a private helipad surrounded by rolling mountains and pristine landscape, Charlotte understood why he loved it. The estate was breathtaking, a modern architectural masterpiece of glass, stone, and wood that seemed to grow out of the mountain itself. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views. An infinity pool overlooked the valley. Everything was designed with impeccable taste but also warmth, like a home rather than a showpiece. "Darius, this is incredible," Charlotte said as they walked through the main living area. "It's my sanctuary," he said simply. "The place where I remember who I am when the rest of the world tries to tell me who I should be." He turned to her. "I wanted to bring you here because I think you're at a crossroads, Charlotte. And crossroads require clarity. This place provides that." They spent the afternoon on the terrace, drinking mint juleps and talking about life, loss, and what it meant to start over. Darius shared stories about building his empire, the risks he'd taken, the people who'd betrayed him, the moments when he'd almost given up but pushed through anyway. "I was married once," Darius admitted as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. "Long time ago. Beautiful woman, ambitious, smart, but she loved the lifestyle more than she loved me. When things got tough, and they always do, when you're building something real, she left, took half of what I'd built and never looked back." "I'm sorry," Charlotte said quietly. Darius shook his head. "Don't be. It taught me what loyalty really looks like. It's not about staying when things are easy. It's about staying when things are hard and choosing to build anyway. That's why I recognized something in you that night at the restaurant. You could have made a scene, could have broken down, could have begged him to stay. Instead, you walked out with your head high. That's loyalty to yourself. And that's the rarest kind." Charlotte felt tears prick her eyes. "I don't feel strong. I feel like I wasted 3 years. You didn't waste anything," Darius said firmly. "You learned, and now you know exactly what you won't accept anymore. That's not weakness, Charlotte, that's wisdom." As the evening deepened, something shifted between them. The conversation grew quieter, more intimate. Darius told her about his philanthropic work, the schools he'd built in underserved communities, the scholarships he'd funded, the businesses he'd helped launch for people who looked like him and needed someone to believe in them. "Money is just a tool," he said. "The real question is what you build with it. Do you build walls or bridges? Do you hoard it or share it? I decided a long time ago that I wanted to be remembered for opening doors, not closing them." Charlotte looked at this man, powerful, wealthy, connected, and saw someone who'd chosen to use everything he had to lift others up. It was intoxicating in a way that had nothing to do with attraction and everything to do with character. "Thank you," she said softly, "for all of this. For seeing me when I felt invisible." Darius reached over and gently took her hand. "Charlotte, you've never been invisible. You've just been looking at yourself through someone else's eyes. It's time to start seeing yourself the way the rest of us do, as a woman with fire, intelligence, and a future so bright it's going to blind anyone who underestimated you." And in that moment, sitting on a terrace overlooking the Georgia mountains, Charlotte realized she wasn't just healing from Trevor's betrayal. She was discovering parts of herself she'd buried for years, the bold parts, the brave parts, the parts that knew she deserved more than settling for someone else's mediocrity. What she didn't realize was that back in Charleston, Trevor was spiraling. And desperate men do desperate things. Charlotte returned to Charleston 5 days later. She'd spent almost 2 weeks in Atlanta and North Georgia, and in that time, something fundamental had shifted. She moved differently now, shoulders back, head high, wearing confidence like armor. Darius had arranged for her hotel bill to be cleared. "Consider it an investment in your next chapter," he'd said, and had his driver take her to the airport in a Bentley that turned heads at every stoplight. Before she left, he'd given her one last gift: a letter of recommendation to one of the top luxury event planning firms in Atlanta, along with a standing invitation to consider relocating. I'm not asking you to make any decisions now, Darius had said at the airport, his hand warm on her shoulder. But know that you have options. You always have options. And if you ever need anything, advice, support, or just someone to remind you of your worth, you call me. Understood? Charlotte had hugged him then. This man who'd appeared in her life like some kind of guardian angel with impeccable style and unlimited resources. Thank you, Darius, for everything. The pleasure has been entirely mine, he'd said with that signature smile. Now go remind Charleston what they've been missing. But Charleston wasn't ready for the new Charlotte Hayes. Within 24 hours of her return, the rumors started. Trevor had apparently been telling anyone who would listen that Charlotte had had a breakdown and run off with some sugar daddy in Atlanta. Her mother called, concerned, friends texted with carefully worded questions. Even her boss at the hospitality firm pulled her aside for a wellness check. Charlotte handled it with grace at first. She returned to work, threw herself into planning an upcoming charity gala, and ignored Trevor's continued attempts to contact her through mutual friends. But the breaking point came on a Thursday evening when she walked into her favorite wine bar and found Trevor sitting at the bar, clearly waiting for her. "Charlotte," he said, standing up with that desperate smile she used to find charming. "Please, just 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking." She should have left, should have turned around and walked right back out. But something in his pathetic expression made her curious. What could he possibly say that would make any of this better? 5 minutes, she said coldly. That's it. They sat at a corner table, and Trevor launched into what was clearly a rehearsed speech. He was sorry. He'd made a mistake. Brittany meant nothing. The investigation into his company was all a misunderstanding. He'd been under so much stress. He loved Charlotte. He wanted to make it work. Charlotte let him finish, then leaned back in her chair and said the most liberating words she'd ever spoken. "No." Trevor blinked. "No? That's it? Just no?" "Just no," Charlotte confirmed. "No second chances, no working it out, no believing your lies. I'm done, Trevor. And honestly, I should have been done a long time ago." His face darkened. "This is about that old man in Atlanta, isn't it? You think you're better than me now because some rich guy paid attention to you? Newsflash, Charlotte, he's just using you like every other man will. The difference is, I actually cared." Charlotte stood up, her voice ice cold. "You know what the real difference is, Trevor? He treated me with more respect in one evening than you did in 3 years. He saw me as a person, not a trophy. And he showed me what I deserve, which is sure as hell not you." She turned to leave, but Trevor grabbed her wrist. "You're making a mistake. That man has a reputation, Charlotte. He's connected to some serious people. Dangerous people. Is that really what you want?" Charlotte yanked her hand back. "What I want is for you to never contact me again. And trust me, if Darius is as connected as you say, you really don't want to keep this up." She walked out of the wine bar with her head high, but her hands were shaking. The next morning, she found out why Trevor had really been so desperate to talk to her. The Charleston Post and Courier ran a story. Local finance executive faces criminal charges in embezzlement scheme. Trevor wasn't just being audited, he was being arrested. The investigation had uncovered years of fraudulent activity. Client money stolen to fund his lifestyle, falsified documents to cover his tracks. Charlotte's phone rang. It was Darius. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm as ever. "I thought you should know before it hits the news cycle more broadly. Your ex-fiancé is going to have a rough few months ahead of him." "You did this," Charlotte said, though there was no accusation in her voice. Just certainty. "I made some calls," Darius admitted, ensured that the right people were looking in the right places. "But Charlotte, everything they found was real. I didn't fabricate anything. I just expedited justice. Men like Trevor spend their whole lives thinking they're untouchable. Someone had to prove otherwise." Charlotte sat down on her couch, processing. "He confronted me last night, said you were dangerous, said I should be careful." Darius chuckled softly. Dangerous to people who deserve it, maybe. Charlotte, I want you to understand something. I don't use my power carelessly, but when I see a good person being hurt by a bad one, I believe in balancing the scales. Your ex humiliated you, stole from his clients, and thought he could charm his way out of consequences. I simply made sure consequences caught up with him. And what about me? Charlotte asked. What do you want from me? There was a long pause. When Darius spoke again, his voice was softer, more vulnerable than she'd ever heard it. Honestly, nothing you're not willing to give freely. You intrigue me, Charlotte. You're brilliant, resilient, and you've got a fire I haven't seen in years. I enjoy your company. I respect your mind. And yes, I'm attracted to you, but I'm 62 years old. I've learned patience. If all we ever have is friendship and great conversation, I'll consider myself lucky. But if you ever want more... He trailed off. The door's always open. Charlotte closed her eyes. She was 34 years old, freshly out of a 3-year relationship, and falling for a billionaire who'd swept into her life like something out of a movie. It should have felt crazy. It should have felt wrong. Instead, it felt like the first honest thing she'd experienced in years. Darius, she said carefully, I need time, real time, to figure out who I am without Trevor, without any man defining me. Can you give me that? As much as you need, he said immediately. And Charlotte, I'm not going anywhere. Take your time, build your life, and when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here. Charlotte took the job in Atlanta. 2 weeks later, she gave notice at her Charleston firm, packed up her apartment, and moved north. Darius had been true to his word. The recommendation letter opened doors she didn't even know existed. She landed a position as senior director at Prestige Events Atlanta, one of the most sought-after luxury event planning companies in the Southeast. Her first major project was a charity gala for Darius's foundation, a fundraiser supporting STEM education in underserved communities. She threw herself into it completely, and the event was a spectacular success, raising over $2 million in a single night. Darius attended, of course, impeccably dressed in a midnight blue tuxedo, and when he took the stage to give his speech, he made a point of thanking the brilliant Charlotte Hayes, whose vision and dedication made tonight possible. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, at the after-party held on his penthouse terrace overlooking the Atlanta skyline, Darius found Charlotte standing at the railing, looking out over the city lights. You did an incredible job tonight, he said, coming to stand beside her. Thank you, Charlotte said. And thank you for the opportunity. This job has been exactly what I needed. You're thriving, Darius observed. I can see it. You're not just surviving anymore, you're building. Charlotte turned to him. It had been almost 2 months since that night at the restaurant. 2 months of healing, growing, discovering who she was when she wasn't trying to fit someone else's expectations. And now, standing here with this man who'd believed in her, when she'd barely believed in herself, she felt ready, ready to take a chance, ready to see where this could go. Darius, she said quietly. I think I'm ready. He raised an eyebrow. Ready for what? Charlotte? Ready to see what's behind that open door you mentioned. A slow smile spread across his face, genuine, warm, filled with something that looked a lot like joy. Are you sure? Because once we start down this path, I'm all in. I don't do casual, and I don't do halfway. If this is real for you, it'll be real for me too. Charlotte took his hand, feeling the warmth of his skin, the strength in his grip. I've never been more sure of anything. And as Atlanta sparkled around them, as jazz music floated from the penthouse and the night wrapped them in possibility, Darius pulled her close and kissed her soft, respectful, but with a promise of everything they could build together. It wasn't the ending Charlotte had expected when she'd walked into that restaurant 2 months ago. It was better. 6 months later, Charlotte stood in Darius's North Georgia estate, watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. She'd moved in 3 months earlier, not because he'd asked, but because she'd wanted to. They'd taken their time, building a relationship based on mutual respect, intellectual connection, and genuine affection. Darius had introduced her to his world slowly, carefully, always making sure she was comfortable. She'd met his business partners, his philanthropic colleagues, the people who mattered most in his life, and they'd welcomed her not as arm candy or a trophy, but as someone Darius clearly respected and valued. Charlotte had also learned the full extent of Darius's influence. He wasn't mafia in the traditional sense. There was no violence, no illegal operations. But he had connections everywhere. Politicians, judges, business leaders, community organizers. He used that network to solve problems, protect people, and create opportunities. "Think of me as a fixer," he'd explained one night over dinner. "Someone calls with a problem. They're being harassed by a corrupt landlord. Their small business is being pushed out by unethical competitors. Someone's getting railroaded by a broken system. I make calls, apply pressure in the right places, and usually the problem resolves itself. No violence necessary." It was power, yes, but power used for good. And Charlotte found herself not just accepting it, but admiring it. As for Trevor, he'd pleaded guilty to embezzlement and fraud charges, receiving a 3-year sentence and a lifetime ban from the financial services industry. Charlotte felt no satisfaction in his downfall, just a quiet relief that karma had finally caught up with him. Now, as Darius came up behind her on the terrace, wrapping his arms around her waist, Charlotte felt something she hadn't felt in years. Complete contentment. "Good morning, beautiful," he murmured against her hair. "Good morning," she said, leaning back into him. "I was just thinking about how different my life is now compared to a year ago." "Better or worse?" Darius asked with a smile in his voice. "Infinitely better," Charlotte said, turning in his arms to face him. "You saved me that night, you know. Not from Trevor, from myself. From settling. From believing I deserved less than everything." Darius cupped her face gently. "You saved yourself, Charlotte. I just provided a mirror so you could finally see what I saw from the beginning, a brilliant, strong, remarkable woman who was meant for extraordinary things." "We're quite the pair," Charlotte said with a laugh. "The billionaire boss and the event planner who refused to stay broken? I prefer to think of us as partners," Darius said. "Building something real together, something that can't be shaken by gossip or doubt or anyone's opinion but ours." Charlotte kissed him, then deep, genuine, filled with gratitude and affection and something that was starting to feel a lot like love. When they pulled apart, Darius had that mischievous gleam in his eye that she'd come to recognize. "What?" she asked suspiciously. "I have a surprise for you," he said. "Remember that property we looked at in Buckhead? The historic building you said would make a perfect event venue?" Charlotte's eyes widened. "Darius? You didn't?" "I did," he said with a grin. "I bought it. And it's yours. Consider it a business investment. You run it, you build your vision, and I'll be your silent partner. Think of it as my way of saying, I believe in you." Charlotte felt tears spring to her eyes. "That's a multi-million-dollar property. And you're worth every penny," Darius said simply. "So what do you say? Want to build an empire with me?" Charlotte laughed through her tears, shaking her head in amazement. "You're absolutely crazy. You know that?" "Crazy about you," Darius said. "So is that a yes?" "It's a hell yes," Charlotte said, kissing him again. And as the sun rose higher over the Georgia mountains, painting everything in shades of gold and promise, Charlotte realized that sometimes the worst night of your life is actually the first page of your best chapter. She'd walked away from a man who'd never seen her worth, and walked straight into the arms of one who'd recognized it from the very beginning. Listen, if you've made it this far, you're officially part of the family. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We've got more stories like this coming. And trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Drop a comment below and let me know. Team Darius or nah? Have you ever had a moment that completely changed your life's direction? Let's talk about it. And hey, share this with someone who needs to remember that walking away from the wrong person is the first step toward finding the right one. Until next time, Keep your head high, your standards higher, and remember, you're worth more than you think. Peace.